we need in this state, and it's going to take at least 30 days, probably at least 60 days probably, before that money actually is available until the state of Iowa gets a plan submitted that's approved.
Is this a question of appropriation, or
yes,
is it a question of legislation?
It's a matter of an emergency supplemental appropriation bill, which would get tremendous bipartisan support. I don't think you'd have anyone vote against it if, in fact, we were allowed to have a vote. What the problem is that the Speaker wants to use the disaster we have here in Iowa with the floods as leverage so that she can pass some legislation at the end of the fiscal year, the end of September, to force people to vote for a bunch of things that you would not vote for otherwise, to put you in political peril, in essence, that if you didn't vote for this big, huge package of new spending, that you are then denying your people in your state flood relief. So it's become a political issue in that it's being used as leverage to get votes for things that you would not normally vote for.
This is maybe one of the reasons why the House of Representatives has a 9% approval rating at the moment.
And I understand it. No one is more outraged than I am as to what's going on in Congress. We have got to stop this bickering back and forth, all the political gamesmanship that's going on, and worry about what the American people send us there to do, our jobs. And
so
that is
what's the likelihood of that? I mean, you guys are vapor locked. I mean, is this a question of simply power politics? Because it seems like you guys are just farther apart in this session than I've ever seen you apart.
Well, and this whole Congress, I mean, a Congress goes for 2 years. Normally, the first year of a Congress, you do policy work and you work together and try to actually get things accomplished. The second year, and the election year, becomes more political all the time. But this has been
because it's
politics.
Also a presidential season too.
Well,
does that mess it up?
That's part of it, but also this whole Congress, since the day after the last election, has been 100% politics. No focus on policy. It's about positioning for next time, new president, all that, and it's just sad because the American people are demanding that we do things, and because of this political junk that's going on back and forth, nothing's being accomplished.
Let's talk to some more of the listeners, and let's move to Todd. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
Hi.
Very much for taking my call.
You bet.
My sister has got into nursing school, but it took her a while to get in, and I know Congressman Latham has been really strong on trying to help with our nursing shortage in Iowa. I was wondering what the status is. I know you've had meetings around the state. Are you planning to introduce any bills, or what is causing this shortage, and what do you plan to do about our nursing shortage, Congress?
Well, thank you, Todd, for that question. That's one of the most critical issues we have today in health care, not only in Iowa but across the country. There's a shortage of nurses in our health care system. I did 6 hearings around the state trying to identify exactly what would be the best way to move forward on it. It comes down to the fact that we do not have enough nursing educators in the system to be able to train the nurses. We're turning away 2 out of 3 qualified applicants for nurses school every year because of lack of capacity. I have introduced legislation, and it's on a bipartisan basis. Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, Democrat up there, is my original co-sponsor. What this legislation will do will give incentives for people to become nurses educators to fill this huge void that we have, and we're going to make sure that this actually happens. And it's endorsed by, I think there's 44 different nurses organizations, different groups, anywhere from the nurse educators to the nurse community college educators to the Service Employees International Union. Across the board, people are totally supportive of my legislation. I'm very hopeful that if we can have one moment of bipartisanship when we get back in September, this bill can move, because it is a critical issue. We're about 2,000 nurses short today, going to 10,000 by the year 2012 here in the state of Iowa, and we're looking at almost nationwide close to 1 million nurses short. And it really gets back to the ability of the schools to have enough faculty to educate these people. So the plan we have is broad support, and I'm just very hopeful we can get it done yet this year.
It sounds like a good idea. I have to ask the question, though, why, if there's such a need, why, and this is not a reflection of you, but why do we need you to do this? Why do we need the federal government to do this? Why can't, if Iowa has a need, why isn't Iowa doing it themselves? And if this actually pays for itself out of tuition and the educational establishment is already there, why aren't we already doing it?
Well, one of the problems is caused by the federal government. The nurses today make about 15 to 20% more than what nurse educators do. So what's the incentive for someone who's a practicing nurse today to go over and be an educator? I mean, a lot of the people who are in education think they can affect more people, but a lot of it is directly related to the federal government as far as the reimbursement for Medicare in this part of the country. People, and there's restrictions.
But if supply and demand exists in the market, why doesn't the market pay them more?
Because the schools don't get enough help from the state here or from the federal government to actually raise the salaries for those nursing educators. And there are obstacles in the way. One is if you're an RN today and you want to part-time go to school to become a nurse educator to get a master's or doctorate degree, you have to quit nursing to do it to get any assistance as far as loans or stipends to be able to go to increase your education. And it's crazy because most of these nurses actually are the either primary breadwinner in their family or they're the person who provides their health insurance for their family, and they can't afford to give up their profession to go to school as much as they'd love to be able to teach and to help other people get into the profession.
Sounds like they've tied this all into a knot, doesn't it?
Anytime you have a lot of involvement with government, that seems to happen.
Can I throw? I know time is extremely limited. I'd like to throw you into the deep end of the pool here for a second, because Postville is in your district,
yep.
And I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this since that big raid, and I have never seen Iowans so annoyed, except for the energy issue, so annoyed with something in their own backyard that they don't quite figure out why a bunch of scofflaws can be running this, a bunch of lowlifes running this operation up there with impunity, and the best we can do is send them a $2,200 fine for violating labor laws. What's up with that?
Well, it is a disaster in Postville, and this, we had the raid in Marshalltown, in a town of about 23,000 people. They took out 90 people and had a huge impact there. When you look at Postville, which is 2,200 people, and they take 400 people out of that community, leave the spouses there, leave young children there. It is a human disaster. It is something that is reflective, I think, of the total lack of any kind of enforcement of the law for decades today. And what the immigration law, all of the policies that should be in place today, and the enforcement has not been there against employers. And you look up at Postville, what happened. Most of these people were from Guatemala. Tell me that there is not a direct pipeline to poor communities in Guatemala. They all came from one region in Guatemala.
Well, it started out poor people from the Soviet Union. And then it started out, then it became poor people from other places in Europe. Then it became illegals from Mexico. Then illegals from Guatemala and other Central American companies. Mm-hmm. Now they're bringing hundreds of Somali refugees into Iowa, and they're still thumbing their nose at Iowans.
We've got to enforce the law as it is, and it also just shows that our policies, as far as the whole immigration issue, it's broken, and we need to fix it. Well, we've got to secure the border. We've got to enforce the law for employers. We've got to make sure that we have a system in place so that employers can actually verify that that person is who they say they are. Currently, there is the E-Verify system that basically says you provide me with a Social Security number, I'll check it, and if that number is valid, then you're okay to be employed. No reference at all as to whether that person is who they say they are.
Should some of those people be in jail? I'm not talking about the workers. I'm talking about the scuzzballs that run the place.
I think when you go up there, and I've worked with the city council up there, we've worked with all the people who are now in essence refugees up there, trying to identify and find out where their spouses are, where the breadwinner is that has been detained today.
Well, here's the thing,
but we need to enforce the law. There should be criminal penalties for these people.
You earlier said, and I agreed with everything you said about energy. We need to be producing energy domestically. We need to be able to supply our own needs.
Right.
Why can't we have the same philosophy about labor in Iowa? Because if they were paying real wages, Iowans will work for places like Postville, but they're not. They're paying subfamily wages and then sticking the community with the social costs. That's a tragedy that I think you guys can do something about.
Well, we've got to have immigration reform to make sure that we are enforcing the law, that we don't have these porous borders for people just to walk through like we've had in the past, and we can talk all about that. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't enforce the law of the land, this is exactly the result that you get, that people thumb their nose, whether they be employers or whether they be the workers themselves. They basically laugh at what our system has been in the past. I mean, this is a human tragedy up there, but it's a result of neglect for the past 30 years.
Congressman Tom Latham, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jan. Great to be with you.
Right after our farm markets with Ken Root, we'll reconvene. Right back to Conversation. Mickelson here with you. We're broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair. And we're going to go on our newsmaker line right now. Before we talk with Jim Hawkins from Iowa Educators, professional educators, we're going to talk with a fellow who's written about the chain of blame. Oh, you're just one of them blame throwers.